Story 1. Keep in mind children and even adults can grow out of bad environments and habits, especially young people. I would say a lack of empathy and remorse should be at the top of the list. However, some very malevolent personalities can act remorseful but truly feel none. It is not uncommon for adults to say sorry but not want to understand what and why they did wrong. Story 2. Entitlement, and when they are downright bullying someone, parents brush it off by saying, "They are just kids," making it seem like their children are the only ones in the whole world who can do no wrong. Story 3. There's an interesting documentary called 7 Up. It interviews children at the age of 7, then 14, then 21, and so on. Without exception, the kids who were poorly behaved 7-year-olds grew up to be poorly behaved adults. It's important to raise children that you like. Story 4. Every time I say this, I get downvoted into oblivion, but all children are salvageable. I worked with some really poorly behaved kids to the point of being criminally liable. I saw these kids really turn themselves around. I wish that all adults who work with children would not give up hope. There is always hope for children. Story 5. They have parents who teach them ignorance. Edit. I mean children who are only shown ignorance, neglect, and abuse. Told they do not matter. Obviously, this is not everyone. Story 6. I believe in a core personality like a base program. You get a sense of how people respond or act in different situations, and they just never change. From what I have seen, a good person is always a good person, and a bad person is always a bad person until they get defeated, punished, or scared into acting differently. Story 7. When their parents are bad. I just went through the school years with my son, who is now 19. I have known many of his friends and their parents through sports and school. You start to get a sense around 5th grade as to why the child is going off the rails, and it almost always comes back to the parents. It breaks my heart. Some of these children had sweet souls and were ruined by parents with addictions, mental illness, or extreme religious beliefs. Story 8. As a semi-professional, I can say there is a lack of regulating. It genuinely seems like the root problem in many children I see. As small children, they cry or experience issues and require regulation to be taught to them. Instead, they are met with verbal abuse or neglect by the caregiver. It is a very sad cycle for both parent and child, as neither ever gets to experience true comfort and are unable to cope with the normal challenges or difficult scenarios life presents. Story 9. Elementary educator here. My colleagues and I were just talking about this last school year, and the theme was echoed in another conversation with a friend and former colleague this month. The common viewpoint in the conversations is as follows. Traits that could be considered sociopathy in adults are presenting earlier and earlier, with each presentation more startling than the last, in the students we teach today. Long story short, yes, you can tell, and yes, there are signs. For me, it is a certain coldness behind the eyes that could almost be described as a disconnection. I have only seen it a handful of times, and once in particular. It is more than a lack of empathy. It is a complete void. It shows up in behaviors toward other students and toward adults. It is generally not the loud, attention-getting outbursts that, conventionally, we are conditioned to associate with a student experiencing some form of difficult moment. Rather, it is the sneaky, silent, organized, and calculated behaviors that are difficult to track and identify. Then, when finally caught and held accountable, nothing. No remorse, no empathy, nothing. Just a cold void behind the eyes. I define a bad person as a human with a callous disregard for humanity and the basic needs of others. This callous disregard can manifest in many ways. How it manifests on the playground grants much insight into how it may manifest in adulthood. Story 10. My niece growing up loved to hurt animals and was spoiled to the point of ruin. She was born sickly but used it from a young age to get anything. She grew up drug addicted and now lives in a halfway house. Story 11. They have no consequences for their actions. If their parents never punish them and always get them off the hook when they get in trouble, they will grow up believing nothing they do is wrong. Story 12. I knew a girl at school who threw her weight around, was nasty to everyone, and knew she could get away with it because her father was the chief of police. He would pull any strings. I have never been one to hold grudges from that age because I believe we are all different people now. However, if I were to guess, I do not think she became a very nice adult. Story 13. Cannot emotionally regulate, does not bond with others, lacks empathy, shows no remorse, and is fully gleefully disruptive and violent. Story 14. Habitually starting fires. One time it's just a kid being a kid, but when it becomes a pattern, it is a huge red flag. I think it is even more telling than cruelty to animals because cruelty can be subjective. For example, a boy killing rabbits with a BB gun or do-it-yourself traps versus putting a stray cat in a bag and beating it to death. Story 15. Bad person. What is the definition? Here is a sign that is not about psychopathy, but about someone who will not be the good friend, partner, or parent they should be. When children need to resort to atrocious behavior to get any attention, even bad attention, they will grow up without the skills to be functional, healthy human beings. That super annoying child is emotionally neglected. I promise. Story 16. My son would attack babies and daycare workers. As a toddler, he had screaming fits. He liked to point as if he was being kicked out. He was expelled from his school 4 times and was on the honor roll 3 times. He lies, steals, and manipulates. The last time I saw him was on Halloween. He had lost a personal item, his game controller, and started screaming at me. He refused to get back in the car and ran off into a very bad neighborhood. He is also a pedophile like his father was, and he is going to prison. After months of ignoring me, he started calling and leaving voicemails. Freaking out. I have blocked him. I don't know what number he is calling from. From almost the beginning, he was trouble. I was not the best mother, but from the time he was small, I could tell something was wrong. As he grew older, he became worse. More bitter, angry, and violent. I feel much guilt over having had him, but I tried to get through it. Now he finally has to face consequences, and it terrifies him. Story 17. Lack of discipline lies at the root, with the individual frequently lying and believing they are getting away with it, often due to having parents who enable such behavior. Story 18. There is nothing a child does that indicates with any certainty how they will end up as an adult. Children do all sorts of shocking things, including hurting animals. I know a very kind man with a gentle soul who hit frogs with golf clubs as a young boy. People change. Story 19. Wasn't it Ted Bundy who said that his parents were good people and that he had a normal childhood? I don't think there was any proof that Jeffrey Dahmer was abused. It makes me wonder if some people are just born evil. Story 20. Not being raised with warmth or love is a significant issue. I see it in many children where I live. There is a noticeable lack of warmth within the community, no empathy or emotional intelligence in anyone, starting with the adults and, as a result, the children as well. The children end up behaving like little bullies toward each other. I believe that lack of warmth and love is a strong indicator that a child will grow up with emotional problems that can lead to various other issues. Story 21. A friend's child came around and told me my house was a terrible place. She also interrupts adults, turns every conversation into something about herself when they are talking, and makes snarky remarks when you go around to her father's house. Like, ugh, what are you doing here? It does not help that her father does not tell her off. I fully believe she is going to be a bully if she is not already. Story 22. Do not understand the word no or think that boundaries do not apply to them or that flouting rules laid down is fun. Story 23. My brother was diagnosed as a sociopath at a very young age. 12. He liked to get fish from the pet store and freeze them because he liked the look in their eyes. I would describe this as cruelty to animals and other children while trying to maintain a good image with adults. Story 24. I have been following the Epstein case a bit. I mean, who has not? I was thinking about what kind of child he might have been or what his childhood was like. He appears to have had zero empathy for his victims and a severe superiority complex. Was that behavior taught or nurtured in some way? Story 25. Literally every antisocial prolific bully I knew ended up dead, in prison, or dead with prior convictions. I am only 40 years old, and this started happening in my 20s. Story 26. Align themselves with reckless or negative crowds. It is tough to break free from the influence of your friend groups. Story 27. Poor parenting might have somewhat to do with it, along with inadequate education, poverty, and being treated poorly by institutions. Yes, that could be a recipe. Story 28. Toxic friends and community. You can do everything in the world to raise someone correctly, but their friends and surroundings have the most lasting impact. Unfortunately, you cannot do anything about it except move them away from a toxic environment. Story 29. Do not think like this as a parent. Love your children and teach them empathy. Do not try to psychoanalyze young children. Surround them with love. If you are still worried when they become preteens, get them into talk therapy. The idea of a bad seed is substantially proven to be a myth. It is much more likely that you will induce behavior later on that is a result of your behavior now. Do not be worried about signs or similar issues in very young children. Be kind to them, be loving, and teach them that their actions can cause pain in others, and also that if they are kind, love will follow. Story 30. Children who have not learned that they cannot always get their way experience a domino effect of difficulties in friendships, relationships, jobs, and more. Story 31. Defiant or oppositional, aggressive or harmful to pets or siblings, overly jealous, vengeful, habitually lying, and unwilling to say "I am sorry" or accept any responsibility for failures or wrongdoing. Story 32. I lied more than anyone else I know when I was a kid. I did not do it because I got a thrill out of it, but to evade the consequences of my actions. Lying is both the fight and flight response in any given survival scenario involving parents. It is the brain telling you it is the most rational thing to do. Say one false sentence and it all goes away. No one is worse off for it. Now I am an adult. I am a good person with a good job, no criminal background, and I do not lie anymore, mainly because I do not face the petty situations that kids get into, like sneaking candy or whatever. I do not have to lie about it. I just go by my own. So no, I do not think lying is a good indicator that a kid will turn out to be a bad person. It just means they have developed a healthy sense of self-preservation. Story 33. Constant lying while looking you in the eye, seemingly no conscience, bullying other children, possibly setting fires. Story 34. Having no consequences for their actions. My parents do absolutely nothing when my brother does anything horrible. Fails at school, attempts to emotionally and physically hurt our baby nieces, insults people using terrible words, etc. That's why he has turned into a beast. He does wrong things and when confronted, doesn't feel ashamed or regretful. I absolutely hate it because my nieces and I have to deal with this burden in human form. The most forbidden thing in our house, which my older brothers would be severely shamed for doing, hitting girls, was done by him and my parents did absolutely nothing about it. He is the only one in my family who will most probably turn into a criminal. And I hate the fact that I can't do anything about it. I do not support hitting children to discipline them, but there need to be other consequences for their terrible actions. One effective consequence that was done to us was having our devices taken for 2 weeks. We learned to behave after that. My older siblings were hit, we were not. Yet to me, all my siblings are as bad as each other. There doesn't seem to be any difference. They all disrespect our parents, insult others, bully, and have many bad habits, such as poor sleep, device addiction, and unorganized rooms. Story 35. Manipulating parents, teachers, and other children by creating situations in which they can be the victim. Story 36. They behave only when an authority figure is present. They will probably grow to be manipulative and engage in gaslighting. Story 37. Once I went to a wrestling event here in Mexico. There was a women's match, and a kid was catcalling the wrestlers. The worst part was that his father was there. He was just laughing about it. Story 38. If a child seems to enjoy hurting animals, that is a significant sign of manipulative behavior at a young age. Story 39. Unable to take accountability. Everything is always someone else's fault, which led them down that road. Story 40. Hi, I just left a message about my child being violent, and I am here to tell you that it is okay to go no contact. Story 41. When parents are overly nice and let their child get away with things, they end up with a spoiled child who is also mentally fragile. Story 42. Well, my stepson, who is now 19 years old, was stealing from me repeatedly when he was 15. He sold the same watch my father left me and the knife collection that was left to me while I was in the hospital. Although he had a full scholarship, he chose to work at Advance Auto instead. It was a clear sign of poor choices. Storage 43. Ego. I know it because of my two youngest siblings. Both of them have egos that have been fed by their friends and social media. My youngest sister is an egomaniac who always believes she is right and chooses the worst people to surround herself with. My youngest brother is a thief and brat who thinks he should get whatever he wants in life. I want to love them, but I cannot. Story 44. A rude tongue is a strong indicator. I encountered a teenager with foul language today, and it was very unpleasant. Story 45. I have known children who, when they misbehave, get a nasty, downright evil look in their eyes. There was a boy I knew who once told people that when he grew up, he was going to track them down and kill them. Story 46. I would say no child is destined to be bad. Usually, it is more about their environment, not who they are deep down. Story 47. When people do good things only if they think they will get something in return, and avoid bad actions only when they fear getting caught. Story 48. They bully other children and know how to manipulate adults so they get away with it. My sister was a manipulative bully. Now she is an actual narcissist. Story 49. One of my nephews has me very worried for exactly this reason. Zero empathy in that kid. He's almost 9. His father lets him run the home, the type of parent that threatens the teacher for telling him his child is being disruptive and a bully. His mother is the typical low-class type, always threatening to fight other women for disrespecting her. Constantly dating a rotation of problematic men from Kansas City with face tattoos and a tendency for domestic violence, then letting her messy breakups play out on social media. She allows the child to punch her in the face when he's annoyed and just laughs it off as typical boy behavior, laughs loudly when the child threatens to throw the cat in the dumpster, does not monitor his social media activity, and he already has a girlfriend he kisses. What a mess. That child has no chance. Story 50. The two children with a careless mother in the dentist's waiting room this morning displayed poor behavior for 45 minutes. Story 51. Being in a mentally and physically abusive household and a primary target for bullying throughout the cohort, with the teachers doing nothing except encouraging the behavior, I feel like I am projecting. Story 52. He or she does not believe in fairness, and there is a good test for it. Ask a child the following question. If I were to give you 3 fresh apples and 3 rotten apples, and you had to distribute the 6 apples among 3 people including yourself, how would you distribute them? My answer was something along the lines of, discard the rotten apples. Let's all have 1 fresh apple each. My uncle, who asked me this question initially, said I was a very caring and sweet person, although that was not what the question meant. You had to distribute the rotten apples as well. On the other hand, one of my cousins, who was raised by a man with poor morals, said he would keep all the good apples and distribute the 3 rotten apples among the other 2. That shows he is selfish and does not believe in fairness. Story 53. As a teacher of primary and preschool children, I believe that some signs include the following. Children who want to do their will command their parents. They lie. They have no empathy for other people. They usually give excuses for not taking responsibility for their actions. They are indifferent to the environment that surrounds them. They usually have bad habits. Many of these behaviors and habits are created because parents are condescending to their children. In addition to not holding them responsible, they solve everything for them. They raise their ego by saying that they are the best and that no one but them deserves the best, which is wrong. One thing is to love your children and be affectionate with them. Quite another is to make them believe that they are the best in every place they go. Another important point is that there are never consequences for negative behaviors, which is why a child usually repeats them. Story 54. I would say women, and especially men in their early 20s, who completely support the traditional wife role and established gender roles from 60 years ago. It is 2025, and you are allowed to have a career that you are proud of. That outdated idea needs to end, in my opinion. Story 55. Bad parents and lack of good mentors contribute significantly to social issues. The vast majority of people who end up in prison come from single-mother homes. Girls raised without a father in the home often face many challenges in relationships. It is not a coincidence that the absence of a nuclear family creates numerous problems. Story 56. Wearing sagging clothes and displaying gang signs at the ages of 11 to 12 makes it much harder to intervene and change behavior once they reach that age. Story 57. Murder usually. If I see a child kill someone, my first instinct is, yes, that is probably going to be a bad person. Story 58. Most often, abuse victims grow up and abuse others. Another interesting correlation with killers is head trauma. Story 59. My daughter has no empathy toward my grandchildren, me or her father. She dislikes visiting her grandmother, and I believe that when I am old, she will be very unkind to me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.